Andrew, welcome to another episode of our podcast here. We are recording this the very end of June with our guest that we recorded a week ago. And it's a pretty exciting episode, but we have a little news to talk about first, and then you and I should catch up as well about what we've been up to professionally. Some sad news to report. People probably have already read this because it's been widely reported, but 3 firefighters died battling a blaze in Colorado known as the Snyder Fire. And we'll acknowledge their names. Emily Barker was 38, Sydney Watson, 27, and Nick Hutcherson was 27. And the New York Times has an article, pardon me, about Emily. She started as a volunteer. I believe this unit was on a heli-tac unit based in Rifle, Colorado, about 180 miles west of Denver. But you and I know the real dangers of firefighting. This was a wildland event, so a little different than the structural firefighting that you deal with day to day. As a volunteer, I have much less firefighting experience than you do, but I think we are both acutely aware of the dangers, both from heat and smoke and other environmental factors. So, tragic event to report.
It is. I'm very curious to see what the report says. In wildland firefighting, they have the watch out situations, and those watch out orders have been written from lessons learned from tragedies in the past. So it is a horrible thing. I heard they deployed their shelters and did not survive the incident. Our thoughts to go out to their families.
Yeah, for sure. Everyone in the firefighting space will be aware of this tragedy. And as you said, I guess a post-incident, almost like, unfortunately, to say a post-mortem report will be done. And hopefully we can all learn from that tragedy. So what else can we talk about? Tell me, what have you been up to professionally?
Well, just running calls in my home agency and working on the app. We've actually, since we recorded the episode, my home agency has had multiple calls on the water in Lake Washington here near Seattle. Some outcomes have been good. Seattle Fire Department saved a girl who went underwater in Lake Washington and found her in a matter of minutes from the time that the truck showed up on scene to the time she was out of the water. It was a fantastic job done by the Seattle Fire Department. Other calls on the lake have not gone as well. So, just calls, training, and then, working on that the Dwell Secure app that you and I have been trying to get bugs worked out and into the market. So
yeah, it's hard not to turn every episode we do as an advertisement for Dwell Secure, but it really is a great product, something you should be proud of. I know you've worked on it for many years. It's exciting. Back to your comment, though, about some of the water rescue events that have taken place. Our guest, we will touch on this just a little bit, perhaps tangentially during our discussion with him, but there was another drowning in our area in, I think it was Lake Sammamish a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about that. I heard afterward that it was a very unfortunate event. It was at the state park in Issaquah, and it was a very crowded day. So apparently a young woman, a girl, I think 15, 16 years old, was walking along the shores of the lake, tripped, fell in, and did not know how to swim. And tragically, no one in her group knew how to swim. And worse than that, there were some language challenges. And as a result, the 911 system, I'm told, and this is just anecdotally, was not activated for more than like 10 minutes, which is so important to get the ball rolling so help can arrive. And then tragically, too, the park was so busy that responding units, it was challenging just to get people to the scene. And I know they They worked on resuscitating the victim for a long time, and sadly was not successful. But water emergencies, water is all around us. Obviously, most of our planet is made up of water. And we live in the Pacific Northwest. We are fortunate to live in an incredibly beautiful place, but that does not mean that it cannot be dangerous. Of course, for people that don't know how to swim, but even for those of us that are competent swimmers, there are a lot of challenges and dangers that are right in front of us every day. So we're going to talk about this. Can you tell us a little bit about our guest?
Yeah, today we are interviewing Dr. Steve Mitchell. And Steve Mitchell started his career as a firefighter, actually, in the Seattle area, the same agency I work for. So Steve Mitchell came on as a firefighter, was always passionate about medicine, ended up going through King County Medic 1 training there at Harborview, and decided that he loved it so much that he himself went back to medical school. I believe he said after 10 years, it took him 10 years to get his bachelor's degree at Seattle University, and then dove into med school. So a person who has literally seen all sides of pre-hospital care, from basic life support to advanced life support to the emergency room. So a huge amount of experience. He knows all aspects of emergency care, and we were very fortunate he made time to speak with us.
Yeah, it was a great discussion. And just to be clear, we talked to him about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, if I remember. And I have to offer an apology to our small audience of enthusiastic listeners. I screwed up the sound on that particular interview so badly. My audio came out terribly. Dr. Mitchell sounded great. You sounded great. And I was even using like studio grade microphone, and just, I think my audio levels were not set properly. And I apologize to you, to our listeners. I've worked with various audio tools to kind of resample the session we did. It is, you can listen to it. It is still packed with useful information, which, we talked about just briefly a moment ago about the dangers of waters and water emergencies. And Dr. Mitchell really has some unique insights that I think is worth listening to, even though you're going to listen to this and say, my gosh, what were those guys doing? And do they even know how to use a computer? Well, we do, and we apologize. And hopefully this intro and our outro will sound better than the middle. But trust me, the middle is what you want to listen to. It's exciting. And as Andrew just mentioned, we're going to talk to Dr. Mitchell. The subject is water emergencies, and the fascinating thing, kind of known as the Pacific Northwest paradox, where we can have absolutely beautiful days here with sunny, warm weather and still have water temperatures that are dangerous to a lot of people. And we'll talk about some of those tragedies. But Andrew, what's everyone listening to?
You are listening to Straight Stick.
Engine 152, Rescue 151, and Battalion 181 respond to an audience hungry for firefighter news, stories, and information. You're listening to Straight Stick.
Andrew, we have a very special guest today, and this is our third episode. So we're very excited to have with us today Dr. Steve Mitchell. And Andrew, I know you've met Dr. Mitchell before. You and Dr. Mitchell were both you, Andrew, are still a career firefighter. Dr. Mitchell was a career firefighter. I'm, of course, a volunteer. So we'll all share that. But Dr. Mitchell, can you introduce yourself and provide as much detail about your current background, but even more interestingly, share with us how you became a physician and what led up to that, please.
Sure. So first, thanks for inviting me. I'm excited to have this discussion with both of you. And I don't often get to talk about my fire department background, where I actually default to, who I see myself to be, is a kid from Shoreline who was a firefighter paramedic first, and all this other stuff kind of came along the way. And my kind of journey to medicine really began after after having a friend in high school who was into, we called it scanning at the time, where we would spend our Friday and Saturday nights kind of going to interesting calls, like when Shoreline got dispatched to a person with chest pain. We would go run down there and watch from across the street while they were taking care of this person with chest pain. And one of those friends happened to be John Nankervis, who just retired and from the Shoreline Fire Department, and was part of an Explorer Scout program with the Seattle Fire Department, which was highly influential. And yet medicine, as I moved along in kind of in my interest developed, I just was stunned by the quality and the amazing things that paramedics could do in caring for patients. And so some of my true lifelong heroes were some of the early paramedics in the Seattle and King County and Shoreline paramedic program, and who were excellent at what they did, and really got the kind of interpersonal dynamics of what it means and the privilege that it is to care for people when they're having often their worst day, or they're super sick. And it's always an event when somebody calls 911 to come and help them. And so I fell in love with emergency medicine in that way. Became a part-time / it wasn't really a volunteer, because I made $10 an hour when I was still graduating from high school, Shoreline High School, in 1983, and was very excited. I remember I was telling somebody the story of my first driver's test, driving the old Kenworth Detroit diesel engines, where Rich Ledoux asked me to gave me a 5-minute lecture on the workings of this Kenworth, and it was all about 1,000 feet over my head. And at the end of it, he said, "Okay, let's go." And I said, "Where's the key? I don't see the key." And so,
I don't know if we should share these details with the general public, but just kidding.
He finished that drive with me, and that I can't believe he survived that drive. And his whole evaluation, he just flipped over and wrote on the back, "Cannot drive." And so somehow I lived that down. Although I will say I was hired full time when I was 20 or 21 years old, and my third day on the job, I actually was driving then and was getting better, but I still managed to run the Marion, what was Engine 61 then, into the brand new Station 61 because I couldn't quite catch my angles correctly. I'd taken it back, fueled it in the back of the department, and yet crashed the engine into the station. And the assistant chief at the time was standing about 15 feet away and just shook his head and walked away. And I thought I was going to be fired for sure, but somehow survived that. And my wife would say, and my kids would say, I still can't drive, but that's a different story. So I loved my time in the fire department. Still some of my best memories, some of my best friends, and I spent from 85 until 1998 in two different departments. I was joined Shoreline as a paid professional firefighter, and then really my heart was to become a paramedic. My goal was to be a paramedic. And so I tested and was hired by South King County Medic 1, which was fantastic, and learned so much. So I was trained in Seattle by under the auspices of King County Medic 1, and went to work down there for a while. And boy, I saw so many sick people and so many high acuity patients during that time. I was down there, and really have great respect for what they do. And then the opportunity came to come back to Shoreline, presented itself, and I was and really weighed whether or not to do it, but eventually came back and spent the rest of my time in the city of Shoreline, and loved it. But left while I was a firefighter paramedic. I found the interaction in the back of the medic unit and going into people's homes incredibly meaningful and really sacred. That became the impetus and the motivation to think about other things and think about medical school. And I'd never wanted to be a doctor, never set out to be a doctor. I mean, it took me 10 years while I was in the fire department to finish my undergraduate degree. And I went to all these community colleges in order to pull it off and such. And so that's not a great way to go to prepare yourself to go to medical school, but somehow applied and got into the University of Washington Medical School first try. And what was their reason, because I was not the best student, and I only finished my undergraduate degree just 6 months before, like a year and a half before. But they saw, wow, being a medic provides you with incredible experience. In fact, I told 2 or 3 stories of my time as a paramedic during my interview with UW School of Medicine, and about some of the challenges that paramedics face every day, and you have to be quick on your feet. You're brought into these incredibly intense circumstances, and just being able to think clearly and be quick on your feet and provide the excellence and care that is necessary to help these people is really, really important. And so that became the motivation. So at the age of 33, after really kind of 15 total years in the fire department, I started medical school in 1998 and did not want to be an ER doctor. I remember Brent Wynett, who was my partner in Shoreline, who's an interesting character all by himself. Hi, Brent, if you're listening. I would used to hide my textbooks from him because I was afraid of him finding out. And one day he saw that I was studying a chemistry textbook, and he goes, "You're going to try and go to medical school, aren't you?" And he followed it up immediately by saying, "You want to take over for Copus." And that was the farthest thing from my mind that I truly did not want to do emergency medicine, and I surely didn't want to work at Harborview, and I surely didn't want to take over Dr. Michael Copus. And yet all of those things have kind of happened in the end. It was actually a very pragmatic. I wanted to be like a cancer doctor, hematology oncology doctor. I wanted to be a geriatrician for a while. I wanted to do. I was thinking about everything, and I did not want to be an ER doctor. Actually, I thought it was too, I wanted length of relationships, ongoing relationships with patients as a primary motivator. But I met my wife in medical school, and she wanted to have this crazy career as a pulmonary and critical care doctor, and which she didn't end up doing. And so kind of pragmatically, I said, well, I was a paramedic for a long time. I loved that, and maybe I need to reconsider emergency medicine. And so I remember it was actually on a drive when I was sitting at 20th Avenue Northwest and Northwest Richmond Beach Road, right in front of Richmond Beach Foods, that I said, I think I'm going to do emergency medicine after all, and made that decision then, and I'm very, very grateful for it, because I am actually kind of well suited for it. It's a match for my personality. I went to medical school at the University of Washington. I trained then after graduating from the University of Washington, did my residency in emergency medicine at the University of Virginia. My wife and I wanted to go somewhere very different geographically, culturally, all these different things. And the University of Virginia was fantastic for that reason. And then because we knew we would eventually come back to Seattle, I eventually wanted to work at Northwest Hospital, but they didn't have a job for me then. So I went to work for Swedish and was there for about a year and a half when Dr. Copus ended up starting became open to the idea of having people trained in emergency medicine to work in the ER at Harborview, which to that point had been the philosophical approach in the ER at Harborview had been, we want surgeons to take care of surgery patients, trauma patients. We want internal medicine doctors to take care of internal medicine problems, and pediatricians for kids, and psychiatrists for things. And he hadn't really embraced the whole value proposition that emergency physicians can bring. And I have unbelievable respect for who Dr. Kopus was, and it's very sad of regarding his passing. But he asked me and two of my medical school classmates to come and be the first board certified emergency physicians to work in the ER at Harborview. And not too long after that, after a few years, I was asked to actually become the medical director of the ER at Harborview, which I did for 13 years, and kind of running the operations of that department while we created a department of emergency medicine at the University of Washington, which is its own side story. And the reason why that's relevant is that I was just recently asked by the dean of the School of Medicine at the UW to step into the role as the chair of this department of emergency medicine. And so now I'm working a little bit less clinically, but I'm in a kind of a supervisory role as the chair of emergency medicine for the University of Washington. So we actually have responsibility for the ERs at Harborview, UW Montlake, and UW Northwest, and a multi-million-dollar research operation. And we now have 72 residents in emergency medicine that staff both Montlake and Harborview, and have a really, really well-regarded nationally Department of Emergency Medicine, and we're kind of really leveraging all of the strengths that have been there for years and years at Harborview and the University of Washington now. So,
Dr. Mitchell, you were talking about how surgeons were doing surgical and trauma and whatnot. Is that what makes Harborview a level 1 facility compared to other facilities?
Yeah, great question, David. What it means to be a level 1 trauma center are several things. One is that you have to have all of the specialists ready and available and really present in the hospital to take care of anything you can think of as it regards to trauma. But also the thing that people don't understand is, to become level 1 certified, you also have to have a very significant research program, because the idea is you need to be part of a true learning organization that is creating the new knowledge that and moving the discipline of trauma care forward, and trauma and burn care forward. And so you need to be part of a big educational and research endeavor, as well as there are a bunch of expectations to be teaching the public and communicating with the public, and whether it's the equivalent of doing CPR training for the public and taking leadership role and doing that. And a manifestation of that has been the Stop the Bleed program that that perhaps your have heard about. That all originated from the American College of Surgery, but it was really our trauma program at Harborview that has led local efforts. And it's so fantastic now to see in so many places. You see an AED, and you see the trauma care, Stop the Bleed equipment side by side quite often. And I will say, in a proud moment, that it was people in our department in Seattle and UW and everything that were huge, not only on community CPR, not only on founding the Medic One program, but also did the primary research on AEDs and cardiac arrest and doing that. And so it's one of the reasons why we get a constant stream of people from all over the world who are coming through and wanting to see our programs and see what happens and see how we do the research and see the Medic One program as the crown jewel of all of that. And it's really super fun to be, helping lead all of those efforts now. So, and
I think also I think the Life Pack was also created here in the Pacific Northwest.
It was.
A lot of important technology starting here.
That was Physio Control, which is a Redmond company, but that was hand in hand with a lot of the research that was going on at the University of Washington at the time, and so it really speaks to how important it is for the kind of creation of new knowledge and research gets together with industry to really benefit the public. And in this case, you can find life packs all over the world now.
Yeah. Well, I should
right now, in fact.
I'm sorry. What was that?
I was going to take I'm working. I'm the pitch doctor for all the World Cup games that are going on in Seattle, and we have a life pack on the field with us every game.
Oh, very good. Yeah, if you need anyone to carry your equipment to any of the games, Andrew and I are both available. So let us know. We're recording this in the middle of June, and we all know, but a lot of people outside of the region don't realize that Seattle, while we get a unusual amount of precipitation every year, is just stunningly beautiful in the spring and summer. And sometimes we get early, extremely warm days, and people get super excited. They haven't seen it for a while. They're wondering what that big glowing orb in the sky is, and they dash off because they think, well, it's 75 degrees. Let's go swimming. And I know Andrew and I have, and I'm sure you have as well, Dr. Mitchell, we've all been on drowning calls, and we've been to water emergencies. The focus of this particular episode really is on cold water emergencies, and the fact, especially in the Pacific Northwest, the water can be deceptively dangerous. And wanted to jump into that, and it's going to tie into your background both as a firefighter for all of your pre-hospital care, but also what happens in the ER. I mean, Andrew and I currently know what to do when we arrive on scene. We rescue a person. If necessary, we start CPR. But physiologically, there's a lot going on that maybe as EMTs we don't fully understand. So maybe you could introduce us to this phenomena of cold water emergencies here in the Pacific Northwest.
No, it's a great topic, and kind of a deceptive topic and the real challenge is specifically around drownings, especially this time of year. And I was sadly read about a recent case. I think it was Lake Sammamish over the week, in the last few days. As it heats up outside, the water is still really cold. A lot of it's from the runoff from the mountains. As things heat up, it remains cold. Plus Puget Sound is just not as dynamic, and so people aren't really expecting it. And when you go from a really warm environment to a suddenly really cold environment, and the differential of, say, it can be 30 or 40 degrees different, your body physiologically reacts to that. And what we know is in the very beginning, there's something called cold shock, if you will, and it's kind of this panic that happens where your body physiologically responds to. You get this big dump of what are called catecholamines, really adrenaline, but you start to hyperventilate super fast as well, and so in response to some of the temperature differential, and that as your body's not expecting a super cold environment, the water, and that's why the first 1 or 2 minutes of a person entering cold water is probably the most dangerous time, because you're hyperventilating, you don't quite have as much control, there's a lot of panic, and so especially if the person's not able to keep their head above water and they start to gasp, then it really affects their ability to breathe. They can aspirate that water. You can get some laryngospasm from that potentially, where your airway is just completely closed off, which would lead to more panicking and some of those types of things. And so, that's why wearing a life jacket is so important, because at least it gives you the opportunity to keep your airway out of the water, was really the primary reason for having a life jacket on, and which I remind my children about constantly, or my teenagers, even though they're great swimmers. And then, once you go along, though, if you survive that first few minutes, what happens is you kind of have, and the water's really cold, and your muscles and your nerves just don't work as well. There's kind of this cold incapacitation process, or some people call it swim failure, I think. And it's essentially, everything slows down, including your ability to coordinate yourself when you're super cold. And I think, we've all experienced that, whether in non-swimming environments where you're just not as fast, you're just not as quick, you're not as responsive, and like your muscles and nerves just don't work as well. And so that begins to be a challenge of, can you coordinate and keep your head above water? You can imagine being in the waves of Puget Sound, and so all of a sudden you have things breaking over your head, or, and of course a lot of it depends on swimming ability, but even people who are great swimmers can still struggle. They still have the physiologic impacts of the cold and really impacting their ability to do what they know to do, know how to swim. And so that's a big challenge. And then eventually, if they're really in the really cold environments, true hypothermia can set in, but that's oftentimes, pick a number, 45 minutes or an hour later. And that's when your body temperature, your core temperature begins to slow down and shut down, or lower, and with that, things start to begin to fail even more. So true kind of drowning can occur at every one of those stages, but there's kind of the initial shock when you get into the cold environment. And then it's like, oh my, I've survived that initial shock. That's probably the most dangerous point. And then, boy, things are just not working because everything's getting so cold, which creates new risks. And then eventually, when your true body temperature begins to drop, that's when things get really, really challenging. And we can talk about. I'm sure all of your listeners know about you're that saying that you're not dead until you're warm and dead, and we should probably talk about that as well. But
but it sounds like the risk is just cascading failures. Maybe taken individually, all of these things could be handled, but when you have muscle fatigue setting in, as well as asphyxiating,
all those things. And go ahead, Andrew.
I also think it's important, even for people like you mentioned who are strong swimmers, like your kids, if these effects are happening on the person who's in the water and you believe you're a strong enough swimmer to go get them, you will jump in and have similar effects for the listeners who believe that they're going to make a difference. And we've done some water training now. We're surface water rescue swimmers, if you will. And a big part of that training is the combative person. If they're just struggling to keep their airway above water and you get near them, they will push you under, trying to push their airway above water. So something for our listeners to be aware of. Even if you're a good swimmer, going is the last option in the number in which we're going to help somebody. So,
and that's not even tied to cold water emergencies. That's just drowning in general. It's almost like it's safer to let them, become unconscious and then drag them to safety.
Was it throw, row, go? Okay, you know that saying better than me. But getting something to them that can keep them afloat while you stay at a safe distance, I think, is the most effective thing. And then, So, what do you? I mean, you're more expert in this now than I am, Andrew. What do you think, Andrew and David?
Yeah. Yes, it's still reach, row, throw, go.
Reach, row.
Go is the last option, and like you talked about, if you have a rope and you throw it to them, if they reach to the point where their muscles don't work, they will be unable to hold on to that rope.
Yeah.
So just for our listeners, be very careful when you are entering that water to perform a rescue on someone else who's struggling. It can make multiple victims. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess one other thing to mention, which I think your audience can kind of see the difference, there are certain times where the exposure and the big catecholamine release or the epinephrine release that happens when you get exposed, that can bring on a cardiac arrest. And then sometimes this cardiac arrest happen when you were swimming. There was an incident of a young person who was swimming in Federal Way in a swim meet and had a cardiac arrest within the past year. And so there are times when that person might be unconscious, and but boy, it's pretty hard to tell whether they're conscious or unconscious, probably in the moment. But obviously, the strategy to get them out of the water is going to be a little bit different, and it'll be hard to really determine whether or not somebody has had a primary cardiac arrest, and that's leading to the drowning, right at the very beginning. But that's a real risk.
Yeah, for people out there boating too, it's important to train and have the equipment that lets you rescue perhaps an unconscious victim in the water. And if your spouse falls over the side of the boat or whatnot, it's very hard to lift 200-pound dead weight on the back of a boat. And you need the gear and the equipment. And if you don't have it, you at least need flotation devices that you can, as you said earlier, make sure their head is above water. And then, of course, activate 911, activate the Coast Guard. So
I always, that's why whenever I buy a life jacket, I always make sure they have the strap on the back for that exact reason, because I remember going fishing in March or April, whenever, freshwater fishing season opens in Washington, and my now 21-year-old son, when he was like 5, fell into the water off the dock that we were fishing on, and I didn't want to get in the water then, but I just was able to grab that strap and yard him up because he only weighed 30 or 40 pounds. But boy, when it's an adult, that is dead weight is a real thing. Everybody who this knows the difference between somebody who's just unconscious and somebody who's dead is very, very, very different.
Yeah. And then also, since we are talking about cold water emergencies, when I was much younger and like learning about life saving and all that, like courses in high school and junior high school, I remember hearing something called the mammalian breathing reflex or something like that I guess allows some people to survive what might otherwise seem unsurvivable events of long underwater exposure. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. What you're referring to is really related to if somebody goes into really super cold water, and we frankly don't see this in the Seattle Puget Sound area much during the spring and summer months, but we do see this in the winter, not infrequently, where if somebody's exposed to very, very cold temperatures quickly, and then the core temperature of their bodies is driven down even more rapidly, then there's a protective mechanism that comes from that, and usually with that situation, those people have not aspirated a ton of water, and they only have a little bit of water in their lungs because almost immediately their vocal cords spasm and kind of protects their lungs from the water often. And so that's where the adage, you're not dead until you're warm and dead, comes from, is that super rapid into truly cold water. Often it's winter conditions, icy conditions, that sort of thing. I'll tell you one quick anecdote. I was working a night shift in the ER at Harborview, and there was a situation where a young person was in a boat on Puget Sound in February, and dialed 911 at about 1:30 in the morning, if my memory serves me, and wasn't found by the Coast Guard until closer to 5 a.m. So 1:30 to about 5 a.m. So how many hours? Hours in Puget Sound. There's no way she survived in Puget Sound in February meaning she went into, I'm very confident she went into cardiac arrest within 15 to 30 minutes. And so was in cardiac arrest for hours, multiple hours. And she was found by the Coast Guard. They initiated CPR, was brought to the Coleman docks where Seattle Medic 32 grabbed her. They said, boy, this does not look survivable at all, but you know what the old adage is. So they brought her up to us, and we did not receive her until 5:30 in the morning. My shift ended at 6 o'clock, and we got her just before shift change. And but we did something called we put her while we're we know the efficacy of doing your classical resuscitation, your Plan A resuscitation, your AHA cardiac arrest resuscitation isn't terribly effective when people are that cold. And I think the medics from Seattle had done 1, maybe 2 rounds, and then just said, okay, that's it. And I think that's great. That's great perspective and the right approach. What we did when she got into the ER was we put her on ECMO, which is basically bypass, where we use a machine to rapidly increase the temperature of her blood. And in this circumstance that we did in the OR, now we'll do it in the ER. And we were able to return her to a more normalized core temperature within 20 or 30 minutes. And then we resuscitated her, and it took 2 shocks, and her heart started to back up. And then the next day, I went up to the ICU and watched her be extubated. So the endotracheal tube pulled out, and she was like, she a few months later came and talked to everybody, and you would never have known she was neurologically completely intact, and you would never have known that she had been in cardiac arrest for 3.5 hours because of that reflex that you're talking about, David. And so
that's remarkable. Yeah,
it's a real thing. It's a true reflex. We think it has to do with just a super fast, rapid descent into that cold protective mechanism of the body. But we have one of the longest case reports on record of somebody surviving in true cold conditions and being completely neurologically intact.
Did the medics do any warming therapies en route, or no. And if they had, would that have lessened or decreased her chances of survival?
All they did was just kind of normal, like, let's protect her from getting any colder kind of thing, and just, covered her. They did a couple of rounds of kind of their Plan A, their ACLS, 1 or 2, can't remember. It's been a little while, and then put blankets on her, dried her off, and then came up to us, and then we were able to rapidly warm her. There's certainly some dangers when you rewarm and you get a perfusing heart rhythm again, or have a heart rhythm that's effective, you return all of the acidic blood back into the general circulation. That can also trigger heart rhythms and such. And so So it's a very dangerous time, and we were able to get her through all of that. And she did great.
I guess there's an inflection point where the brain needs oxygen versus.
Yeah, and the brain just, the metabolism of the brain had just completely shut down, and it became protective. And I don't understand the physiology of that, to be honest with you. It's just but it's just everything slows and doesn't die. Which is incredible. The body's able to do that, and then you warm them up, get the heart starts going, and everything starts to work again, potentially. Obviously, there's lots of cases where it doesn't happen.
So for the pre-hospital workers that are listening to this, is there anything, if you were in the ER on duty, is there anything different you'd like to see in the care of a drowning person or extremely hypothermic patient before they reach your steps?
Yeah, great question. I think a lot of it is just kind of basic care that we provide every single day. I don't know if it's something different, but, so it's good airway management and, maintaining an airway if the person needs one, not being afraid of that. But if somebody is truly hypothermic, then they're in a very fragile they're truly hypothermic, and they have a perfusing heart rhythm. They have a heart rate, they have a blood pressure. Mm-hmm. They are very, very fragile at that point. And I have absolutely seen cases where people not recognizing that and recognizing how fragile they are and doing kind of rapid movement and let's throw them onto the stretcher. That alone is enough to stimulate them to go into cardiac arrest. And once they're in a cardiac arrest, then their chances of survival aren't zero by any means, of course, but the chances of survival go down quite a bit. Where we see that more, and the kind of the classic scenario for that, is somebody who's is intoxicated or is overdosed, and they have exposure. They're outside, and it's not recognized how cold they are in the process of moving. They go into cardiac arrest, and it's the hypothermia of that makes that happen. But so if I was encouraging everybody, it would be mindful of how somebody who's really cold could be just like a breakable object. You have to kind of gently move them over so we don't break them in a literal way, and kind of treating with that. And then it's just kind of supportive care, but not too much supportive care. And I may want to modify my first statement that, careful airway management does not automatically mean intubation, because there's some thinking that, laryngeal stimulation and the process of putting an endotracheal tube into their throat may be enough to trip them into that fragile state and go into cardiac arrest. So be kind of minimalist, adequate, but minimalist at the same time until we can effectively, rapidly warm them up. Is probably the safest thing, the safest approach from my perspective on things.
I think that's very useful advice, because I don't think I really learned that as part of any of my training. It was more like, this is a dire emergency and rapid extrication, rapid transport. But you're really saying be very, very careful. Certainly on the BLS side, we may not even be able to detect if they go into cardiac arrest. Right. Unless you're doing, your every so often checking. But fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. So, treat them like like you're receiving a package, and there's, the fragile stickers that are all over the place. Got to treat them like that. You got to move. You got to do the thing. You got to get them out of where they're at. But be as gentle as possible in the process, and manage their airway. Get get lines going, and give them meds if they need it and stuff. But just be a little bit more on the minimalist approach until you can, they can be aggressively rewarmed. Again, we have ways in the emergency department we didn't have 10 or 15 years ago, where we can do that super effectively, and we can cool people also, and we're still cooling some patients in cardiac arrest because of that. There's that protective mechanism of hypothermia. Not everybody, but that's a whole separate conversation.
Right. That is very good information, Doc.
That is helpful. Andrew, what do you recall some dramatic water-related rescues that you've participated in?
So it was actually, you mentioned John Nankervis earlier. The most memorable one in my career was a little girl who fell into a backyard pond, and it was actually John Nankervis and his wife who stopped by the station to go to lunch, and they were first on scene, and she had drowned, and short version is she's alive and well. Now she's in her 20s now.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
yes, the two of them going to lunch ended up being first on scene, and it was just a backyard. But yeah, she's doing great from what I hear, and the rest of the water calls unfortunately haven't gone very well in my experience in shoreline. Yeah. So one of the things that we've done at our station, we're at the north end of Lake Washington, and we just threw some towels, just a hospital towel in our defib unit, we can pat them down before we attempt to apply the patches.
You bet.
Help. So what about you, David?
Unfortunately, well, similar to you, unfortunately, all the water calls I've been on with Eastside Fire and Rescue, and actually Fall City as well in the North Bend area, have not been successful. In some, and I don't think it's the cases we saw were related to cold water emergencies, but just unfortunate people caught up in debris while floating in the river and getting sucked down and having their ankle bracelet tied to their board not come off in time, and them getting stuck and subsequently drowning. And those were they were heartbreaking because they're often young people in these situations, and actually strong, vibrant people as well, physically capable, but just not able to overcome the lack of oxygen and just probably the panic situation of being stuck with debris in the water there. I do recall one, and this was an impetus for this particular episode, years ago in North Bend, kind of an early summer event where it was just beautiful, probably 80 degrees out, and 3 high schoolers went swimming up by the power station and jumped in the water, and only 2 were able to come out. And I think part of it was they got sucked into one of these eddies, but it was also the cold water, and it was tragic. And that involved the King County Sheriff's Marine Unit coming and diving and searching for hours for the one kid that was underwater, and it was tragic. So
I have great respect for those King County police officers who are doing that sort of work. That's talk about a hard task.
Oh yeah.
The Marine underwater divers who often doing body retrievals, and necessary, but boy, that's a tough job. So hats off to those folks.
Yeah, they work hard, certainly, and as do the firefighters, all folks like Andrew and all of his colleagues doing the swift water rescue stuff. It's sad when it involves young people. It's sad when anyone is lost, but particularly sad for young people. The case that happened, you mentioned briefly just a few days ago on Lake Sammamish, I had heard it was just someone walking alongside the bank of the lake, tripped, fell in, and was not a swimmer. So obviously that ended poorly. I was on a call when I was a volunteer with Eastside a few years ago, a call to Lake Sammamish, and it was a young person from California visiting our area, beautiful day, tripped, I think probably concussed themselves on a dock, and drowned very quickly. And it was a body recovery event. So terrible. So, I mean, Dr. Mitchell, you're exposed to these tragedies daily. I mean, Andrew and I, on a much less frequent basis, but you see these, not necessarily drowning, but just emergencies of all kind, daily basis. You all along talked about how you loved being a paramedic and it was exciting, but then you were, for a while there, thinking about careers in medicine that were not like that. But you came back to emergency medicine. What excites you the most about it today? What are the calls what are the episodes you have in the ER that are just fulfilling and challenging? I'm sure many of them, but are truly fulfilling to you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I'll answer that in two ways. One is just to see the capabilities of what we're able to do in life-saving measures that are new, that we couldn't do, and that as technology has really progressed. And it's so fun to be part of the research side of things that's progressing that as well, and kind of discovering what works and what doesn't work. And that's the unexpected, phenomenal part of the seat that I get to sit in. And so whether that be stroke care or cardiac arrest care, or how how medicine now can change a heart valve through the growing and going and doing it intravascularly rather than opening up a person's chest and having open heart surgery, to ECMO. We have I have people in my department who are routinely going on using Airlift Northwest to go to all over what we call the WWAMI region: Washington, Alaska, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho. One of my colleagues just went up to Alaska and put this person who was incredibly unstable, and his heart he would have died at any point in the past, was able to put him on this bypass ECMO, bring him back down safely in a stable way in this case, he went to the University of Washington and got the surgical procedure that he needed, I believe intravascularly. And I have this great picture of him, and my emergency medicine doctor, who was also a critical ICU doctor, took care of him that same week in the ICU at the University of Washington. And so it was just, some of those things are how science and technology and techniques have progressed so much is great to watch. But boy, I find at this point in my life, I'm not an adrenaline junkie anymore. I've always had a little bit too much adrenaline, since doing this since I was 18, really like 16 years old, and I'm not 16 anymore. It still remains the meaningful conversations that I can have, and that like seeing the incredible resilience that people have, and seeing the incredible hope that people have in the midst of tragedy. And I recently started working a lot more at the University of Washington Montlake campus, and some of the conversations I get to have with people, again, kind of these sacred moments to me, are just really meaningful as I get invited in this role as a doctor, get invited into these really incredible moments in people's lives that are moments of tragedy, moments of hope, moments that they won't forget, and treating it with that kind of respect and kindness and care and is, I think, a real high privilege that all of us who are in this field get to participate in, and we need to and I would just encourage everybody to understand that and respect that, and to have that sort of gratitude as you're approaching it, because it's a really hard job at the same time. It's not to discount how challenging any of these roles are, because of how many things are out of your control and challenging, and you have and we can it can create a lot of problems for us, but at the same time, it's an incredible opportunity that we have to enter into those circumstances and care for people, love people, be kind to people in moments of their crisis, and that is just high privilege that I'm really grateful for, that I learned in the fire department, that I learned in the back of a medic unit, that I learned going to, 350 North 190th, and about 1,000 times. 350, is that right? 350, 360? Anyway, I'm trying to get, whatever the address is at Chriswood, and, that kind of thing. Anyway.
Well, so you said you were a adrenaline junkie, but you sure you wouldn't want to do like a ride along with Andrew or one of the medic units? I don't know.
I didn't spend enough time, and I only got to drive the tiller once, so I would love to drive the tiller again. So if Andrew could arrange that, that'd be great.
I don't know. It sounds like after your 3-day episode or 3 days on the job, but that might not be advisable. So these are expensive machines.
I'll wait for the fire station, and I'll be fine. Just keep me 100 yards or more away from a station, and I'm good.
Very good.
We do our tillers drivers training right down the street from your house.
Really?
Yeah, we do it at Point Wells. So.
Oh, you do? Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. That's
so
awesome. You don't do the Greenwood Place? Is that what it is? Cut back anymore?
We still do that.
You do? Okay.
But you have to earn the right to go on the road. You drive through the cones at Point Wells. Make sure you're not going to hit a car or a curb. Then you go on the road.
That's the difference between 1983 and today. That means That means we have made progress. That's awesome.
Yes, I mean, aside from all the medical stuff, you were at Shoreline during the Paul Keller days, weren't you?
Oh my, yeah.
So you got
tell us about Paul Keller. I'm not familiar with him.
Fire experience.
Boy, there's a lot there.
Yeah,
there's a lot there. Paul Keller's was a brother-in-law of a friend of mine who was a police. Anyway, Paul Keller was the most prolific arsonist in U.S. history. At one point, I think he still is, and he was somebody who knew all the operations of the fire department. So he knew what Seattle would do. He knew what Shoreline would do. He knew what Evans would do, whatever. And in those days, we were all, there were like, 7 people on shift or maybe 10 people on shift or something like that. And we were really augmented by part-time guys, by part-time men and women. And he would do things where he would start a fire like a block from Station 63, say, and then he would pull everybody to Station 63, and then he'd go into Richmond Beach on the far west side of the department of our jurisdiction and start a fire there, and he would watch us scramble and go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and stuff. And so, and it was a season where you'd come on shift and you pretty much knew you were going to have a working structure fire, which is incredibly different than normal life. And one of the comical things that happened during that period is we had some PhDs and some PhD students from Seattle University who were trying to study stress and impacts of stress on firefighters. And they expected to come and find us just completely wigged out and having a terrible, and being all stressed out and we're not sleeping and all these PTSD things. And it's like what they found was like, oh man, we're having the time of our lives. This is so much fun. And it got dark quickly because some people died. But we were so good at structural firefighters. But my colleague, I spent a lot of time with Tom Agnew, who was my partner then, who's now since long been retired, and we did a lot of Paul Keller fires together, and we always joke about the time when there was a Paul Keller fire in Richmond Beach, which I live in Richmond Beach and drive by this house all the time, and I always think about that as I drive by, where it was a partially involved structure fire, and we were in the medic unit was first in on the nozzle, and all of a sudden we're going up some stairs in a split level house, and we got our helmets completely blown off by Mark Bundy, who was on the engine nozzle. What do they call that now? I've forgotten. Basically, the
deck gun.
The deck gun, and he just blew up the house, and we got in the way of his straight stream and just like knocked us all around, blew our helmets off, and knocked down the fire, of course. But anyway, it's like, Bargy, what are you doing? And yeah, that was a wild time. It was both fun, and then it got dark, and then the fascination. We were really, really close with King County police officers. I mean, I'm sure you are still to this day, but one of our best friends, an officer by the name of Greg Knapp, became the primary detective in solving that crime in collaboration with Paul's father, who put some things together, and he came to I remember when he came and presented to us exactly what had gone on in kind of cracking the case and arresting Paul, and where they basically brought him into a room after they arrested him in this operation that was interesting all by itself, and then showed him his entire life in this room, including all of the fires and consequences that he had been part of for the past few, years, the most concentrated in the recent few, weeks and months. And it was meant to be just like game over, we got you, but they were hoping, and what really did happen is that he would confess, because they needed a confession on his part in order to really close the case with them. And so anyway, so it's really a terrible, tragic story because people lost their lives. And he, I mean, I could talk about that for another hour all by itself. Going to one of our well-known nursing homes, which is, and thinking it was an automatic fire alarm, and realizing, oh my word, somebody kicked in the window, and we found this pile of furniture that he had set on fire and was going to try and burn up this nursing home. That, again, just three blocks from Station 63, and realizing it was the sprinkler system which had contained the fire, and things like that that were really dark. And there were some children that came very close to losing their lives, and there was that were really dark. But it was an interesting time. But
well, I have a feeling we're gonna discuss that with you in the future, because that sounds like an entire episode all by itself. A true crime meets firefighting.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Story. Well, Dr. Mitchell, I know, as I said earlier, I know your time is valuable, and we appreciate you taking as long as you have to talk to us about cold water emergencies, your background in the fire department, and your ascent to become an important figure in emergency medicine. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. I'm just realizing that I am late for my noon meeting because we've been talking. So I'm just letting somebody know that I'm going to be a little bit. But I'm sorry, I'm a little late. So anyway,
well, thank you very much, Dr. Mitchell.
Great, nice to be with you both, and I look forward to the episode. And you both have a good day. And Andrew, it's really nice to see you again. And David, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well, Dr. Mitchell. Thank you.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye.
All right, David, I really enjoyed talking with Dr. Steve Mitchell today. He is a wealth of knowledge with a very impressive resume. He was able to explain why the human body has the inability to respond to your brain's commands when you jump into cold water, and why people can get into trouble. It was great. It was great hearing his perspective on all of his through all of his experience.
Yeah, and I was also impressed too, Andrew. Sorry to interrupt. That you brought up the dangers of people that are not drowning jumping in and trying to help someone. They're, with the best of intentions, they can get themselves into a mess of trouble.
Yes, I mean, as you and I are both riding on fire engines, we have the mindset of, we show up, we want to do something. And many people have the best intentions, and they see someone in trouble and they think, well, I could do something. I'm here. I'm going to do something. Then they jump in the water, and those same effects that are affecting the person in the water are now affecting them. And now we have multiple patients. So Please be very careful around cold water.
Yeah, if you have a throw line, use that. If you have a dock pole, use that. Worst case, take your shirt off and use that. Kind of extend it to the patient. Just don't get within grabbing range of someone actively, drowning. Unfortunately,
like we talked about earlier in the episode. Go, meaning jumping into the water, is the last option for people who are not involved in the incident. So try everything else first.
So now that July is approaching and the warm weather is coming, do you and your family have any plans to be out on the water?
Well, my wife is not a boat person, but she is a paddleboard person. So we will be close to shore in calm water. But yes, we will be out on the water. We hit the Puget Sound quite a bit. Cranberry Lake up by the Discovery State Park. So yes, we will be on the water, but we do wear PFDs and sunscreen.
Yeah. Oh, smart. Yeah, we always wear PFDs. We have our dog wear one as well because Stanley's a Scottish Terrier and they are not adept at swimming. So he needs all the flotation help he can get. So I want to, again, just reiterate that apologize for the sound quality for the middle portion of this episode. We're still excited everyone is listening. We love the topics. We love talking about firefighting and rescue services and all of these things. And again, our hearts go out to the families of the firefighters that died in the Snyder Fire in Colorado. You and I are going to be back soon. We've got a number of topics that we want to cover, and they really I think we're picking topics based upon the things that are fun and exciting to us. And I'm pretty sure they're going to be exciting and fun to people that listen as well. So thanks very much for introducing Dr. Mitchell to the program. And it was really a good conversation.
It was. Thank you, David.
Appreciate it, Andrew. And we'll be back next time. Take care.
Take care.
Attention, all units. All of the content of Straight Stick is copyright protected. Don't forget to subscribe so you hear the tones when future episodes drop.